Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprint. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock, with new content for you every single Tuesday, even throughout the summer at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We ask that you like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. Definitely a message you're not hearing on the mainstream media, and it is an important one today. We're talking about agriculture in Canada, something that this Liberal government does not seem to value at all. To talk about this and much, much more, we are bringing on John Barlow, the Member of Parliament for Foothills in Alberta, also the critic for agriculture. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks very much, Jamie. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, your riding like mine, tons of farmers, agriculture is the way of life, supports the economy, but it doesn't seem like this Liberal government actually understands at all how this industry works.
Yeah, certainly it's very clear with, starts at the top with the choices they've made as agriculture ministers under Justin Trudeau. The fact that I would say that policy that impacts agriculture is being made by environment and climate change, not the Minister of Agriculture. And when big decisions are announced, whether that's fertilizer tariffs or the capital gains inclusion rate change, the Minister of Agriculture doesn't even know that these things are happening. So I think it's almost beyond a disdain. It's not even an afterthought.
Yeah, we've said many times, and you've been doing a great job on this file. This is definitely something that you can tell in your heart you really do care and are passionate about the agriculture sector in this country. But one thing after another, right? A lot of our farmers are getting older. It's tougher to attract new people into the business. But of course, why would you want to break your back for 14 hours a day and barely eke out a living?
We went to a mushroom farm in Carleton earlier this week and met with two brothers who have kept on the family operation. They're into their 40th year now. And that was exactly Fernando's comment. He said, I really question why we're doing this. They've invested millions of dollars to improve their barns and their efficiency, and he said all we're doing is getting punished by higher carbon taxes. They paid $180,000 in carbon taxes last year for one small business. That goes up to $500,000 in 2030 when they quadruple the carbon tax. And he said if it goes to that, they're done. And that's a common story we're hearing right across this country, where those family farm operations are teetering on whether or not they're economically viable. And we just can't lose these farms across Canada. That puts our food security at risk, but certainly our rural economy is at risk as well. There's not businesses that are stepping up to replace that family farm.
But at the end of the day, we all have to eat, right? So this idea that the Liberals have that we can just live in utopia and we don't know where our food is, so we'll import it from other jurisdictions. The quality might not be as good. Who knows about the price? Of course, if we can't produce our own, we're at a severe disadvantage. But it's one thing after another, but it's this mindset that we'll have a government program to fix that problem that we created, right? We'll just import food, right? Like, people have just had enough.
Yeah, and I think people are seeing it. Maybe the bright side of this is that Canadians are starting to finally question and want to understand where their food comes from, because they're seeing food prices at the grocery store continue to increase as a result of Liberal-driven inflation. And you're exactly right, Jamie. What will happen is we will have to start importing more food from around the world, which has a much larger carbon footprint, has not done to the same environmental standards and quality standards that we have right here in Canada. But the larger threat of that is Canada is one of only 5 countries in the world that exports food to help feed the world. So we're not only talking about Canadian food security, we're talking about global food security. If Canada is no longer able to meet the global demand, there will be a food security question or crisis around the world, especially with what's going on in Ukraine, in the Middle East. Demand for Canadian products has never been higher. But because of Liberal policy, it is becoming more and more difficult for us to meet that demand and to meet that opportunity, which would be an incredible growth opportunity for Canadian agriculture.
Yeah, and it seems to emanate from these big government thinking types, right? That think they have the better ideas. So it's the non-productive people regulating the productive people.
Yeah.
Right. So probably people that have never stepped foot on a farm, maybe don't even know anyone who drives a pickup truck, right? Like, then telling them how to do business. You've got to go organic doing this. Well, what if the conditions aren't right for it? Or what if you put me out of business, right? Like,
Right.
how can this make any sense?
Well, and again, the science of organics, and there's a place for all of
There's
these
a market
things.
for everything.
For sure. If you want to be organic,
Abundance.
that's your choice. The market will dictate that if that's successful. But to go solely organic is actually worse for the soil. We would have to cultivate 50% more land just to meet what we're doing now. So where's that land going to come from? And that means you're going to be tilling up grasslands and wild fescue, which is the most endangered ecosystem on the planet, is our natural grasslands in Canada. But the fact that, I think to your point exactly, is a lot of this comes from those folks like our Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, who's like, oh, you think you're going to do a 30% fertilizer reduction? Oh, just wait and see what we're going to do. So when the European Union, for example, at COP26 in Glasgow said, we're going to reduce fertilizer emissions by 30%, he gets up on the stage and says, oh, we're going to reduce it by 50%. Like it's some sort of challenge because it looks great on Twitter.
He feels good about himself.
What he should have done on that stage is say, well, you know what, European Union, that's a very laudable goal. And Canada will show you how to get there because we're already there. We're 70% more efficient in fertilizer use than any other country because of our zero-till, precision agriculture, the machinery that we make right here in Canada, like air seeders and air sprayers. Like, let's export our technology and innovation around the world. We'll help you get there because we're already doing it. That's what he should have said.
Yeah.
But instead, he comes up with these arbitrary numbers that punish Canadian farmers rather than rewarding them for the work that they're already doing.
All right, we have a couple clips here. This is you in question period, talking about a few issues, but one in particular is the change in capital gains, which I think will hurt a lot of retirement plans for quite a few farmers across this country. So let's play cut one.
Liberals' increase in the capital gains inclusion rate from 50 to 60% is a direct attack on Canadian farm families. Will the Prime Minister end his attack on family farms who are just trying to put food on our table?
It's important to note that when he and his government were in power, they slashed $500 million at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. They slashed $200 million out of the Business Risk Management Program.
Still not reassuring that the Agriculture Minister still doesn't know that there's going to be a capital gains inclusion rate change that is going to impact Canadian farmers. And the only thing that this tax change is going to do is feed an obese Liberal government.
I think that hits every point. It's very true, right? Like, this is their measurement of success. How much money goes into government? Right. This is the Liberals. Whether or not it's working, it doesn't really matter. We're actually getting worse results because we keep chasing farmers out because the government is getting so obese.
Yeah, our average age of a farmer now in Canada is 57, and it's getting older. So we need to have programs in place that incentivize that succession planning to the younger farmer, which we did through Larry Maguire's Private Members Bill 208 of last Parliament, which helps the capital gains, makes it much more difficult to increase that inclusion rate from 50 to 67%. That is a 30% tax increase on that young farmer who is wanting to take over the family farm. The worst part of this, Jamie, is part of that clip was we had the minister at the Agriculture Committee the week before that, and we asked, myself and my colleague Warren Steinley, did you consult with farmers on this inclusion rate change before you included it in the budget? The worst part is we asked him, did you know this capital gains inclusion rate change was in the budget? And he said no. So one of the key pillars of the Liberal budget, the Agriculture Minister didn't even know it was in the budget. So either he is asleep at the cabinet table, no one bothered to tell him, and it's probably like to your very first point. They don't care about Canadian agriculture or the impact that their policies will have on Canadian farm families. And what this will do is you will start losing the family farms. Big international industrial companies will come in and buy up these farms, and then we will have these large industrial multinational farms, which the Liberals profess every single day that they don't want.
They seem to put their policies encouraging all of that.
Exactly.
So we can have our agriculture industry, like our telecommunication industry, like our grocery industry, like our airline industry, and the list goes on. So no competition, worse service, worse products, and worse prices.
100%.
Because you can't go anywhere else. The government has eviscerated competition or the ability for a small person or a person, an average person, anybody, to start up a business, a small business.
Yeah, you'll have higher prices, fewer choices. You will not have the same standards we have right now. You will not have the same innovation that we have now. And plus, the impact on our rural communities would be catastrophic.
Devastating. The economy would fall apart there.
For sure.
Plus the input costs. We have carbon tax still punishing. Do you want to talk? Let's cue up cut 2, where you actually. I'm sure it was tough to talk about it. The constituent here will play the clip, and then you could almost feel the emotion in the author's writing and as you delivered it. So let's play cut 2.
I want to quote a letter I received the other day from a business owner in Bragg Creek, Alberta, one of my constituents. As the owner of a heating company operating in rural Alberta, I hear every day from my customers how the Prime Minister's carbon tax has forced them to make the decision whether to heat or eat. And now with the hike on April 1st, it is only forcing them to go deeper and deeper into poverty. The fact that anyone in this great country has to live impoverished is already distasteful. The Liberal government seems to take pleasure in our suffering. The same is true for businesses, especially rural businesses. We are barely staying above water as it is.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, and I know I'm not the only one who's getting those types of calls and emails and letters. And I phoned that business owner as soon as we received the letter, and had a lengthy conversation with him. And he, these business owners are out there talking to Canadians and their neighbors every single day, and certainly he was feeling the stress of his customers. And this is from a homeowner to other small business owners to farmers who are his customers, and he is certainly seeing the impact that the carbon tax is having on everyday Canadians. That for some reason our Liberal government believes that their 300 economists have it nailed, where 40 million Canadians just have no idea. They've just never had it better.
Experiencing it differently.
Experiencing it differently. Yeah, exactly.
So where are we with the Senate? Our private members bill is our friend and colleague Scott Davidson that had Bill C-234 to take the carbon tax off fuel being used on the farm. Where are we in that? It's in the Senate somewhere. Lost.
Yeah, it's Ben Lobb's bill, actually.
Ben Lobb, sorry.
Yeah,
I apologize.
Ben Lobb put forward Bill C-234. We've got it through the Senate, but the Senate, Liberal-appointed senators amended it, and that's where this letter from that constituent is so poignant, is that the amendment from the Senate removes the exemption or the carve-out for heating and cooling of barns. Mushroom farms, greenhouses would no longer get an exemption on propane and natural gas. Many of these farmers and these small business owners in rural Alberta, and I'm sure it's the same in many other parts of Ontario where you're from, Jamie, are paying more in the carbon tax than they are for the actual natural gas that they're using or the propane they're using. Like, that is unfathomable when you are paying the carbon tax, the GST on top of that carbon tax, and it's costing you more than the actual energy you're using to heat and cool your barns or grow food in a greenhouse. So right now, I think we've got one more chance to try and get it through in this Parliament. We'll bring it up as soon as we can this fall. This will save farmers $1 billion by 2030. This is $1 billion back in the pockets of farmers. This will help reduce food costs at the grocery store shelf. But right now, we don't have the support of the Bloc, and we don't have the support of the Liberals. We need to try and find a way to get the Bloc back on side to get 234 passed in its original form, unamended, so every farmer and every family farm gets the same exemption, same carve-out in propane and natural gas that every other farmer would. Right now, drying your grain would be included, and certainly as we've seen in Eastern Ontario that it's been a pretty wet year thus far, so there's going to be certainly, you dry your grain and corn every year, so we don't want to ignore that maybe we can give farmers a break on that side, but we'd certainly like to include everyone as we had originally.
Yeah, it's really tough for some of these farmers because they don't always have the ability to pass that on to the consumers. And it's not really fair to keep jacking up the price for people when they can barely afford food as it is.
Yeah, and this carbon tax, and I think where farmers are maybe a bit unique, is they pay the carbon tax over and over and over again. When they buy fertilizer, when they buy seed, when they buy fuel, when they are hauling grain, when they are moving cattle, when they're moving their product through rail. In Alberta last year, it was $20 million just to move their grain by rail. It was more than that in Saskatchewan. So farmers are paying this carbon tax all along the supply chain. So when the Liberals try and argue that the carbon tax is not having an input on food prices, like how can you possibly with a straight face say that when the farmer's paying the carbon tax, the trucker and the trains are charging the carbon tax, the manufacturer who's processing the food is paying the carbon tax, and the retailer who is selling the food is paying the carbon tax. So everywhere along that chain, everyone is paying it. So of course, at the end of the line, when the customer goes to buy the groceries at the grocery store shelf, they are not only paying the carbon tax once, they are paying it multiple times. That is driving up the price of that product. So our food prices are absolutely impacted by the carbon tax over and over and over again.
All right, John Barlow, thank you very much for your time. As you know, the guests get the last word. The floor is yours.
Well, thanks very much, Jamie. And our biggest challenge with this and what the impact of this is having on our farm families across Canada is we need consumers to also understand that this is impacting them. This just isn't an issue for rural Canada and our farm families. This is an issue for every single Canadian, as we said, who is paying higher prices on the grocery store shelf, who is having to make that very difficult choice between eating, heating their homes, paying for a summer vacation, or just trying to put food on the table, right?
Get through life.
Just to get through life. Yeah, this is impacting every single one of them. But certainly our farm families across the country are the ones who are at their wits' end by doing everything right. And that's what we're hearing all the time. Is we're doing everything right. And yet we can't get any further ahead because the Liberal government continues to punish us with higher carbon taxes and more restrictive regulations. And I don't see it getting any better. And it's up to the Conservative Party and our colleagues like yourself that are working extremely hard to hold this government accountable, but also raise the awareness with Canadians across the country.
Yeah, and we know farmers love what they're doing because after all this punishment they're getting from this Liberal government, I'm glad on them for keeping going.
Yeah.
And I appreciate their feedback and appreciate your time as well. Thank you very much. Doing a great job on this file. John Barlow, the Member of Parliament for Foothills, also the critic for agriculture. We thank him for his time. We thank you for yours. We'll have new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. Tell your friends. They can download it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. You name it, it is out there. Until next week, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.